ever wondered if your tap water is safe to drink? Hello, my successful and healthy earthlings. Mihaela Ragush here, naturopath and founder of the Natural Health Podcast. In this episode today, you're going to learn just what I found in tap water and hopefully make an informed decision if you will drink it or not. Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast. We bring awareness of sustainable health in the business hustle space. Natural Health Podcast is perfect for the high-performing, business-minded individuals who want to work with their biochemistry to achieve success and optimal health. It's Wednesday, which means it's time for What Would I Do? Questions. In today's episode of Natural Health Podcast, we discuss this week's question or questions are kept confidential. I read them and answer them as if it was me, hence why it's called What Would I Do Wednesdays. The information provided is not to be taken as advice and is solely for information purposes only. I'm not here to cure, treat, or provide medical advice. I'm here to educate and inform you so you are able to take steps towards optimal health. Please discuss any medical issues or lifestyle changes with your healthcare professional. Let's get into today's question. I absolutely loved getting this question because doing the research for this was amazing, right? So the question is, I live in Australia and I have been drinking tap water my whole life. Our water is safe and clean. Well, I think so anyway. Is it safe to drink tap water in Australia? What an absolutely great question. Is it safe to drink tap water here in Australia? I mean, we don't live in a third world country. We live here in Australia, a well-developed country where you would think drinking tap water wouldn't cause any issues. But let's look at what the research has to say. It's interesting because when I looked into it, actually, until the 1990s, Australia took great pride in their safe drinking water, which is quite interesting. So that's what, about 30 years ago, right? They took very good pride in drinking there, making us safe, right? Then in 1998, Sydney Water was forced to send out an alert warning that water from its large treatment plant contained dangerous parasites and was unsafe to drink. Imagine getting that. There's a parasite in your tap water, stop drinking it. That would definitely lose a little bit of trust in that water. The problem was eventually addressed, of course, and the source of contamination was never pinpointed. They never knew what caused that incident, that accident, right? And this, in the research that I've read, actually marked the beginning of the public losing the trust in safe tap water for drinking here in Australia. It may be different all around the world, but that's what happened here in Australia. And that's when the public kind of lost a little bit of trust. There are a number of issues. Let's see, how many issues do I have here? I've got 5 issues that may be with tap water. Okay, number 1 is the testing. Okay, for more concern to all health conscious Australians should be the fact that our tap water is only monitored for 70 chemicals, whilst there are over 300 known chemicals that should be of concern. Microplastics, for example, are a common found in tap water that are not regulated. So when the tap water gets tested, and everyone says, hey, our tap water is tested, we only actually look at 70 of those chemicals, and there are over 300 of them. So you're missing out on 230 chemicals being tested that are unregistered, unregulated, such as microplastics. Number 2, I'm going to keep this short because I only have 10 minutes here, but I could actually do a whole podcast on this, which I probably will do. But number 2 issue is the testing is done for adult and not children. So the maximum allowed limits for chemicals in tap water, such as lead, nitrates, chlorine, have been based on adults and children, but not infants and small children. So they're only based on adults and not infants and small children. Many studies have therefore Hashem, there's no safe level of lead or nitrates for infants, right? So tap water for infants, I don't know. Number 3 issue is PFAS, right? In Australia, over 60 sites have been identified with PFAS contamination so far. None of these have been identified as a risk of contaminating for local water supplies. Like Erin Brockovich, famous from the movie with the same name, have sounded several alarms for the risk of PFAS in Australia in recent years. Something for you to do a bit of research on. Number 4 is your pipes, right? Okay, so there might be no issue with the water, but think about your pipes, right? Another challenge is that most testing is carried out directly after the water treatment. So the water's getting treated. This means that building and neighborhoods with older damaged pipes are not necessarily identified by the water utilities. For example, your pipes could be leaching plastics, copper, iron, lead, biofilms, parasites, bacteria, anything that you can think of. It might be in there and you have no idea because it's not getting tested. And the question is, are you testing your tap water? I bet you're not, right? Number 5 is storms. In 2020, there are more than 250 50,000 Melbourne households were told not to drink their tap water after supplies was contaminated in a huge storm. These kinds of accidents happen occasionally, but citizens are almost always informed. They're always informed, but there may be an issue with it, right? So essentially, a 2016 study here at Macquarie University study suggests some Australians are at risk of consuming hazardous levels of lead from their tap water. However, while the levels of lead exceed the acceptable limits as laid out by the ADWG, it appears the issue lies with the domestic fixtures rather than the water supply, right? So much information right there, right? So in the events, essentially, look, if there's something that happens here in Australia, your utility company will let you know of potential contamination, right? But they will not let you know what is happening with your pipes, right? They can't let you know. It's none of their business. That's your pipes. That's your issue. Some questions to ask yourself. Let's go into it. Now they're giving you so much information. Questions to ask yourself is, where in Australia do you actually live? Because each state has different policies around water. Do you have a current health issue? Do you currently have any diseases? Where do you live and how old are your pipes? When was the last time the pipes got cleaned or even changed? Do you have a filter on your tap or plumbing, right? When you use tap water. Keep getting excited about this topic. Look at him go. He's barking his head off. So are you okay with drinking microplastics? That's another question. Do you have children or infants drinking your tap water? Do you know what they use to clean their water? Oh my gosh, the questions that I could keep asking you just do not stop here. So many questions to ask yourself, right? What would I do? Okay, what would I do is I would figure out where I'm living here in Australia. I am living in Australia, Victoria, Geelong, right? So I would figure out who supplies my water, right? I would figure out who supplies my water. Then I would figure out what testing is done for that water, what they test for. Do they test for only those 60 chemicals or do they test for those 300 chemicals, right? Then I would figure out the current house that I'm living in, or an apartment or unit, is how old are the pipes in the property that I'm living? When was those pipes tested? If need be, I would call out someone to replace the pipes, test the pipes, figure out what is happening, right? Understand the health of the current pipe system. I would be aware of any alerts that arise in regards to my water supply. Figure out their history. When was the last time there was a contamination and things like that? I would figure that out 100%, do a bit of research on that. I would put a filter on in my water tap, right? So either I would have a filter with the water or I would have a separate filter, because I myself don't really trust what's in that water. What I do is I filter my water and then I add back minerals and vitamins that are important, that are actually found in water, that are important. But think about it actually, if all the information that I have provided you with, do you feel comfortable drinking that water? That is my question. That's the one question you have to ask yourself is, do you feel comfortable drinking that water? Because that water is getting tested when it's getting cleaned, and who knows what it's getting cleaned with, right? That water's getting tested when it's getting cleaned, but then you have to make a journey. Even figure out how long is that journey? How long is the journey from the water place to where you live? How many different pipes does it have to go through, right? What does it pick up along the way? And then you're ingesting it. Have you had parasites before? Do you have any health conditions that might impact it? What is your current health status, right? Think about it. And water, we've been told water is absolutely key for health. But the key is that it's good quality water is absolutely key for our health. So there you have it. I hope that this sheds some light to your question, and anyone listening who may have this question or issue. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me at mahela.raguz on Instagram, and I'll be in touch with you and hopefully be able to answer your question via the Natural Health Podcast. And remember, do what you do best. Love, like, share the Natural Health Podcast. Share this episode with anyone that you believe needs to know about current status of tap water in Australia. I didn't even go into the fluoride status. I didn't even go into that discussion, but hopefully I will do a podcast episode specific to tap water here in Australia. So there you have it. Remember, the missing link between failure and success is your health. Consult your own medical professionals for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the Natural Health Podcast. It is advised that you consult your doctor or healthcare professional in relation to any health concerns you may be having. Mahela Raguse does not take responsibility for any health consequences which occur from a person listening, viewing, or reading this content. Under no circumstances shall the Natural Health Podcast, Mahela Raguse, any guests or contributors to the Natural Health Podcast, or any employees, associates, or affiliates of Mahela Raguse be responsible for damages arising from the information provided on the Natural Health Podcast. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical conditions in either yourself or others. Please note, if you're taking prescription, do not stop your medication or start a new protocol, including but not limited to supplements, diet, lifestyle changes without consulting a doctor or healthcare professional. If you or any person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical advice. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have read or heard on the Natural Health Podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. Neither Mahela Raguse nor the publisher of this content takes responsibility for the possible health consequences of any person or persons reading or listening or following the information in the educational content.